Okay, we're going to talk about common WordPress maintenance mistakes and how to avoid them. A little bit about who the person is who's giving over this lesson. My name is Ilana. I have about 10 years in content management, having worked on the content for the websites of WashingtonPost.com, Taglit Birthright Israel, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Haaretz.com in English, just to name a few, and 4 years in website development. So I've been responsible both as the end user, responsible for maintaining and editing the content, and the last 4 years as someone who's been more involved in the development and the technical end of things. The purpose of this lesson is to teach someone who is more of the content manager, the end user, how to best do their job while maintaining a WordPress website. And we go a little bit into some more advanced details that might fall under the role of the developer as opposed to the content manager. Through the course of my work, I figured that I viewed about 100 WordPress websites, both those that I've developed myself, ones that I've been responsible for editing the content on, those that I've gone in and made some small fixes to, those that I've edited on an ongoing basis, sites that I've looked at for the purpose of providing a proposal for improving upon them or redesigning them, and so on. I've looked at a lot of different WordPress installations, a lot of different themes and setups, plugins and add-ons, and I feel that I've gotten a good sense of how a site can be properly maintained and some of the common mistakes that I see all of the many users who keep their websites updated, or not, as it were. And I've taught WordPress development and maintenance to about 40 students, both as a part of a 6-month-long course and through one-on-one lessons. I currently provide WordPress website maintenance services to about a dozen different sites at any given time. If you're watching this, you probably believe that maintenance is important. We're going to underscore why it is that it's important to understand this. If you have a WordPress website, and what I'm referring to here is a WordPress.org website, meaning a WordPress site that is WordPress because it is running the WordPress content management system, and it was set up by downloading the WordPress files from WordPress.org. Okay, we're not talking about WordPress.com, hosted by WordPress. And we're not talking about Weebly or Wix or other sites where you're using someone else's system and are somewhat locked into it, and ultimately we're talking about self-hosted WordPress, where the end user is responsible for keeping the theme updated, for making sure that the latest version of WordPress is being run, and to a larger extent, being responsible for protection against hackers. Okay, those who are running their websites on their own hosting account. That's the target audience of this lesson. Okay, so unlike fully managed sites, like those built using Weebly or Wix, for example, self-hosted WordPress sites are the end user's responsibility to keep updated and secure. So this lesson is for the user that wants to understand how to do that. We want to protect your site against incompatibilities that break the site. Sometimes I'm hired to make some changes to a site, and I go in, okay, I want to see how the site is set up, and I see that many of the plugins haven't been updated. They're running very old versions, and the version of WordPress that's being run is also old. This is a problem because perhaps we want to use a feature of a new version of the plugin, but if we update the plugin, and an old version of WordPress and or an old version of some other plugins are running, there might be conflicts that could have been avoided if everything was kept up to date. They're more likely to run into incompatibilities because things aren't kept updated. Updates will improve the user usability and search engine optimization. Updates help keep the site secure. A lot of updates are important security patches. Basically, hackers and developers are playing a cat and mouse game where a hacker will try to find some loophole to break into the site. This loophole becomes exposed, and then the developers release a new version that contains a security patch. Then hackers try once again to try to find a new vulnerability, and the cycle continues. You want to, as much as possible, stay on top of the most secure version of your version of WordPress and anything else attached to your site to keep the site secure. This also, by the way, pertains to the computer that you're using to update your website. Okay? I have heard that it's possible that infected computers can also pass along things through connections and infect websites as well. But we're not going to get into computer security today. What we will cover are some basic tips, common mistakes that I see most often, and I'll provide some links to further information. As much as possible, I also will include questions. You can also feel free to add them as comments at the end, and I'll try to get back to everyone. What we'll not be covering is theme-specific information. Theme options can be endless. Plugin-specific information as well. I can't possibly cover all the details of every theme or every plugin. I'm talking about some general guidelines that pertain to pretty much every WordPress installation. I'm also not going to go through step-by-step how to do things in particular. This is meant to be a basic guideline that you can use for further research or to follow up with later with me. Okay, first most common mistake that I see relates to permalinks, or the URL structure. Links of your site should be clean and logical. So this means you don't want yourwebsite.com/QRTS359. I think we've all seen sites like that where the URLs don't make any sense. You don't want this. WordPress is known for having clean links. By default, with the most recent versions of WordPress, it typically takes the name that you've inserted for your post and appends that to the end, and that's your URL structure. And you can go ahead and change this on individual posts and pages, and you can edit the default settings as well. So here's an example page, okay? Here's About Me. So the permalink is at irgwebsites.com/about. I could edit this on an individual basis to maybe I want it to be about me. I could just change it like so, and then hit update to actually finalize the changes. Please note that once your link is live and you change the permalink, you'll want to perform a 301 redirect so that any links that have been indexed or bookmarked by users will get redirected by search engines and by users. So for instance, this link had been irgwebsites.com/about. Now that link's been around for a while. If I decide that I want to change the permalink for whatever reason, then I'll need to perform a 301 redirect so that all the places that irgwebsites.com/about won't end on a 404 error page not found. They will redirect to this link. You can also change your permalinks across the site by going to Settings and Permalinks. Here you can change the structure. I advise pretty much everyone to select post name. This will do what we saw, which is take the page or post name and tack it onto the end as the permalink title. You can also play around further with the link structure by changing the category or tag base. We're not going to get into that in this lesson. What you most definitely want to avoid is the plain, with p = 1, 2, 3, and so on. The last point I want to make about permalinks is that if you create a new version of the same post or page, check the permalink. What I mean by that is the following. If I go back to the About page, for example, and let's say I want to create a new version. Maybe I want to do A/B testing. Maybe I want to show it to someone else. Maybe I want to try out this new version of the About page for a while, but I want to keep the old one. If I create a new page called About, Look what happens here to the permalink. It becomes about-2 because it takes about, but it can't create another link that's exactly the same as the other one. That just can't happen. Every link needs to be unique. So it appended a 2 onto the end of it. I've seen a lot of sites where the URLs have a 2 on the end or something else, and it looks a little bit sloppy. So if you're going to have a new version of a link, you might want to change it, in this case, to something like about me. Or if you are not going to use the original one anymore, then you can go ahead and delete it. And then in this case, /about would become available for you to use. Okay, second mistake I typically see is in image management. This pertains to the size of the images, the editing of the images, the naming of the images, and so on. So first of all, the naming of the images. You want to use logical titles for the images that you upload to your site. You might go to an event, take lots of photos on your digital camera, then upload them to your site, and you have tons of images that that are named things like DSC32, DSC33, DSC34, DSC35, and so on. Okay, these titles are going to make it difficult for you to distinguish between the images and what they are on your computer, and they're also going to be difficult to manage in the media library. What you want to do is change the names of the image files themselves. You can give them titles in the media library, and before you upload them to the media library, you want to adjust the file size before uploading. A good rule of thumb for content images, and by this I mean an image that you might embed in a blog post, not a full hero style background image or anything that's going to be displaying really large, but an image used for, as part of the content of your page, for instance, is to try to make it less than 100 kilobytes. There are several different programs out there that can compress your photo sizes. Another thing that you can do if you're using an image editing program is save for web, usually found in the file menu. And try to keep your image file size as small as possible. This will significantly reduce the page load times, which improves the user experience, and it improves your SEO because Google does not like slow page load times. Okay, next thing to know, when you're uploading an image to the media library, you need to add alt tags. Alt tags can be added here, and what they stand for is alternative text. The reason for alt tags are if someone is disabled and they have difficulty seeing, they will use a screen reader to help them navigate websites. Screen reader is great at reading out the text. The screen reader, however, does not know what's in the image unless you insert an alt tag. So the alternative text, for instance, of this is the IRG website's logo. That means if this is embedded on the page and someone is using a screen reader, when it gets to this, it'll say IRG website's logo, which at least means something to the person. The other purpose of adding alternative text is for the search engines. Similarly, Google does not know what this is unless I tell it what it is, okay? So adding alternative text is also important for SEO. As a addendum to that point about SEO, a lot of traffic to websites can sometimes come through Google image search. Someone will only know, and Google will only know if it's a relevant image based on what's inserted as the alternative text. Lastly, there are plugins like WP Smushit and eWWW Image Optimizer, which can further compress your images once they're uploaded to your media library. I've found that sometimes these plugins can cause bugs, and that users who are using them then will find that they get HTTP errors and other errors when they try to use it to compress their images, but it's worth a shot if page load times are very important to you. Third major mistake I see is backups or lack thereof. Backups are extremely important. Trust me, I've learned this the hard way. It's important to understand that you need backups of the files and the database. Now, many end users don't understand what the difference is between the files and the database. That's fine. Just think of them as two equally important pieces of the WordPress website. Okay, you need the database, which contains site options, your post content, a lot of the settings, and you need the files, which contain things like the templates for how the different pages look, and the style sheet, which controls what font families are used, for instance, and the size of each section of your site. You need backups of both, because if either becomes corrupted, you will need to restore them. Really need to have a systematic way of performing backups in place. When I initially started, I would manually perform backups whenever I would remember, or maybe when I did a big update. But sometimes I'd been working on a site for hours, and I was just, I didn't want to bother doing a backup. What would happen later? I would realize that something got buggy, and I would need to restore a backup, and I didn't have it. Or something broke, and then I didn't have a backup. Now, I rely on systems that perform backups, sometimes more than once a day, and which I can always manually perform a backup on after I've made a major change. But most importantly, I can schedule backups, set it and forget it. I know that it's done for me. This is really important because in my experience, if you leave it to an individual to perform backups, it just won't happen because people will get busy, or, people don't like to think that the worst can happen. I advise to keep copies of your backups off of the server. A lot of times by default, the backup will be saved in the same place as the website on the same server. This is a problem because if, God forbid, the server got infected or crashed, then your backups will be lost too, okay? So you want to save them somewhere else. You might want to host them in the cloud somewhere, have them saved to Dropbox or Google Drive. Amazon also provides services. Should perform backups before any major update. My last point is really don't ignore this. Make sure you have solid backups. Updates. We touched on this in the beginning of the lesson, but I want to make sure that the 3 parts of the site that need to be updated are understood. You need to keep the version of WordPress up to date, your theme up to date, your active theme that you're using, and you need to keep any plugins that you have installed and activated up to date as well. Some updates can be performed within the WordPress dashboard. For instance, plugins, you might see an Update Now link next to the plugin name, or you might see here, updates. And it'll tell you what needs to be updated. So for instance, I have a plugin here that needs to be updated. It's version 2.02.03, and I need to update to 2.02.04. So this is a very, very minor update, but nonetheless, it should be performed. And I can update it in this instance just by clicking here and hitting Update Plugins. There are a lot of moving pieces to a WordPress site, particularly if you have a lot of plugins installed. It is very important to keep them all updated so that as much as possible, they can play nicely with one another. The last major sin I see committed by content managers is actually the small details of the content itself. One of the things I commonly see, because sometimes it's a default setting, is that post images link to the image file. By this I mean that if you're on a website, let's go to my website for example, and I'm looking at a page and there's an image, that if I click on it, like if I click on this image, nothing happens. That's what I would expect. This is an image associated with a post, and I feel as a user no expectation that if I click on this, it's going to bring me somewhere else. However, on some sites, by default, if you click an image, it brings you to a URL of that image. So in this instance, an actual URL of the image, like this. It's very simple to change this. When you add an image, so in our instance, this image, it's very simple to change this. When you add an image, you can select here, and when it says link to, make sure that none is highlighted. By default, sometimes the link to is the media file, which will just bring up a page with that image. The other thing I commonly see are the default widgets. The sidebar that WordPress has kept since the very early days when it was primarily a blogging platform. If we look at this site that I created for the purpose of some exercises for class, you can see that on the sidebar, there's search, categories, recent comments, meta. These things are often on WordPress blogs by default, and nobody really wants to see this. I've never seen this actually properly used. It's always just left here by default because the person didn't know how to remove it or couldn't be bothered to remove it. And removing these default widgets from the sidebar is very, very easy. All you need to do is go to Appearance, Widgets, and then select one of the items that you want to remove and hit delete. The last thing that I commonly see are tags inserted into posts willy-nilly. Tags will not help you with SEO. This is a common misconception. So if I have a blog post on website maintenance and I add lots of tags like WordPress, maintenance, website maintenance, website updates, so on and so forth, and 20 tags, that won't help me rank for the search term WordPress website updates. Tags are really just used to show a relationship between one post or another within the WordPress. So those are the top 5 mistakes that I commonly see in WordPress website management, and I'm adding in one little bonus. Hello world! It's a little bit of WordPress's sense of humor. The hello world is the default blog post that appears in every new WordPress installation. Remove them. I've actually been on websites where I've gone to the blog roll, and if I get to the original post, it's hello world, and it has some default content in there. It's cute, but it doesn't look so professional that it's left there. You also want to remove the default initial page text that shows you all the different headings and things that you can do to edit the page. You also want to make sure to remove any demo pages and posts that were inserted if you imported some demo content with your theme. All of these things should be removed because they clutter up the back end of the site, and you don't want any user coming upon them by accident. I hope that you've enjoyed this lesson. Please stay in touch. You can reach me on Facebook, Twitter, and by email, and message me for some advanced tips and if you have any questions, and we'll hopefully follow up with another lesson soon.